Good morning, and welcome to A Drink to the Past, because I assume you don't watch this at midnight when we post it, or so, depending on, how long the podcast goes.
Good. Whenever your period of time is, I just dropped a bunch of bottle caps all over my computer.
That was awful silly.
Yeah, maybe I should stop storing bottle caps above my computer.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, welcome to A Drink to the Past, the only podcast where I'm here. Because I am not on other podcasts, except for, technically, I am part of another podcast that we should record a second episode of, so Crow, if you're listening, let's record another episode there, shall we? One of these days? Hey, look, I can focus the camera, isn't that neat? I should have probably done that before I, started recording, so...
I mean, to be fair, that's a similar level of professionalism that everybody expects from this show. So,
that's true, yeah. I mean, unfocused camera is probably the least of our worries, considering our theme song is 2 cans of beer opening.
Yeah. Or in this case, a can and a bottle.
Yeah.
Ooh, this is actually a pretty good beer.
Yummy. You got something different this time?
I do. I have a Peach Stand Rambler, blonde ale from Odell Brewing Co.
Neat.
Which is a nice little seasonal...
Yeah,
it's definitely a blonde, and I can definitely taste the peachiness in it. Kind of opposite to my usual beers that I drink.
I'm dropping stuff here. Today on Sean Drinks Something Stupid, I have Tin Cup Whiskey, which comes with its own tin cup, which is pretty neat. It screws on the bottle and everything.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm like, that's convenient. You'll never lose it. Even when you're drunk and camping. Tin Cup.
Oh, it's literally Tin Cup Whiskey.
Yes, Tin Cup Whiskey. Comes with a tin cup. Jessica Jones drank it in one of the episodes, so it's famous or something. Yeah, it's pretty good. They're based out of somewhere in Wyoming, if I remember right, but that could be completely wrong. I don't know. Elevation 5,251, so they're 29 feet below us here in Denver. So, cheers.
Cheers.
And I have to drink again because I dropped the cup earlier. Alright. Now that we've got that into my system, welcome to A Drink to the Past. We're a podcast. I'm your host, Sean Michael Patrick Thompson, and this is my co-host.
Hi, I'm Chris, still angry about current events, Audette. I'm probably gonna be... Yeah, I'm probably still gonna be angry for a while. Maybe just a little while.
Okay. That's fair. Current events are stupid.
Current events are pretty stupid.
I had 5 almost gigs this month, and all of them have canceled but one. And I'm like, going to a gig might endanger me anyway, depending on the context of it, so, that's kind of awkward. So, and then I had one that was like, oh yeah, this is going to be, all good, and then they canceled on the last minute, and I'm like, come on, man. So,
be
such
safe
is
out
the
there,
life
people.
of a musician. But luckily, I have other sources of income, like this podcast. I'm kidding, we don't make money.
Yeah. Have you seen any money from the podcast? I sure haven't.
I've drank a lot more beer because of the podcast.
But you know what?
I think cost me money.
Yep. I feel like that's fair.
Yeah. So, last bit of tin cup here. Woo! Ooh, this is a rye one. This is different than the regular
rye
one.
whiskey?
Yeah, it's a rye whiskey.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know they made a rye, but apparently this one is a rye version of it. I'm like, it tastes a bit different from the one I remember anyway. I feel like the regular one's a bit smoother. I think the regular one is a bourbon-y sort of whiskey, but it's been a while since I had that either. My brother let me have the last bit of the bottle after we went camping last week, so it's a good camping whiskey. And I guess impressive feat, literally just chugged about half this bottle in front of me, and I was scared for his life.
I heard some stories about that camping trip.
Nice.
From a few other people.
Yeah. They're all true.
I guess there's bourbon ryes.
Probably, but
That
I guess
that's a
you'd have to have a certain amount of rye and a certain amount of corn, because to be considered a bourbon, I think it has to be
yeah.
majority corn mash.
Yeah.
I
But
forget.
there are bourbons with 20 to 35% rye in them apparently. So yeah, rye bourbon is a thing.
Neat. So I guess that's a thing. Anywho, my beer of the week is Breckenridge Brewery's Summer Pils, which is not too bad. I had a couple of these earlier today. A couple of 4 or 5. I do pre-gaming. Yeah, not too bad. Nice hot summer day beer. Now it's warmed up, it's not quite as refreshing as it was. A little hint of like banana or something in there. I don't know what all this is. It says bright Bohemian style Pilsner. I don't know what
You're
the
drinking
difference is between a Bohemian style Pilsner and an American Pilsner or whatever. But,
You're drinking a pilsner that isn't I guess when I think pilsner, I'm used to the ruined form of pilsner that comes. That's the more typical kind of American beer.
Yeah, or a lot of, craft breweries will brew a Pilsner specifically to have something light on tap for the people that are like, I have a Coors.
Yeah.
I don't know what beer is, I just drink Coors.
It's a shame.
Yeah, I got this in my fancy-ass Lord of the Rings cup here. So, it's got Frodo on it. Look at that.
It's a little Frodo Baggins.
So, I always like to show off my fancy glassware. Gives me an excuse to buy more glassware, which I always need one of those because I have a wife. But, that comes with other benefits. Anywho, let's get into the podcast, shall we? What you been playing there, Chris?
Let's see. I've been in the tabletop gaming sphere. I've still been playing a little bit of Call of Cthulhu. Where I happened to play the one law-abiding character while everyone else went off and, shot cops and visited an eldritch location and died horribly or was exposed to horrible things.
Isn't that how it goes?
Yeah. And then they stole my couch, so that was fun. In terms of video games, I've been Dead by Daylight's can probably be assumed at this point. I've been playing quite a bit of that.
Played in a Pyramid Head?
I have played a little Pyramid Head. I don't quite get him yet. I think he seems like a fun character. But I need to get more used to him. I forgot to mention this last week, but I also started playing an RPG called Helix, or Hylix, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. And it's got all clay motion graphics, and the main character has basically a moon for a head. And when you attack, the attack animation is just you snapping your fingers. And the dialogue doesn't make any sense. So, it's kind of interesting. I've only played a very little bit of that.
Right. Sounds like it could be somebody's jam, or cup of tea, or what have you.
It certainly could.
Yeah, I've been having an interesting time with Smash Brothers. Now that Min Min's out, I've been looking for good ways to kind of practice Min Min. I don't know what it is. She's way more addictive than any of the other DLC characters, so I've just been coming back and wanting more noodle arms. So went online actually more than I have in a long time in Smash Brothers, because the online in Smash Brothers is not very good. But actually I had several good matches where the lag wasn't terrible, and only a handful of terrible lag matches. because that's kind of what to expect in Smash. And it's weird because I'm like, I want to be like doing online, so I'm not just like fighting CPUs, because it feels more satisfactory, and I feel like I gain more actual skill fighting against human players than I do against, computer players. But
Yeah.
at the same time, fighting computers doesn't have any lag, and that's it's really helpful. So yeah. Other than that, I've been doing a lot of spirit battles too, because I'm like just getting into the somewhat addictive nature, and now I'm like going back and forth in the spirit battles between Ike and Min Min, who are now apparently my two biggest mains. I'm like, I haven't even touched Ganondorf since Min Min came out. I'm like, sorry, man. Leaving you by the wayside.
He's gotta get good with that Min Min.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm happy they've added Min Min to the game.
Yeah, she's
too.
a really ridiculously fun, unique character, and just kind of the way that she works is really kind of hilarious, because like she's a really good edge guarder, because she can guard the edge from a long way away from the edge. So like Ike doesn't edge guard like at all, because he's all short range and no jumpiness. So, but like Min Min can like be like far enough away from the edge to where no matter what kind of attack you have off the edge, you could not possibly hit her, and she'll hit you before you get to the ledge, because of the range on that dragon arm is just crazy. So lots of fun there. I also put in Link's Awakening earlier today again, which has been a little while since I've played that game, the remake. So I'm going through. I started hero mode 3-heart run a while ago, so I'm a little bit further into that. I beat the 4th and 5th dungeon earlier today, which took some doing on 3 hearts on hero mode, but it's been fun.
I think my favorite dungeon in that game is probably the Face Shrine. So, the one you're about to go into.
Yeah, the one I'm coming up on next is... that was the one that gave me the most difficulty as a kid for some reason. I just went around and around that dungeon in circles for hours.
It
hours.
also has my favorite dungeon music in that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The music in general in Link's Awakening is pretty good.
Yeah.
It was a little iffy on the Game Boy, but it almost had like this surreal quality to it because of how weird some of the tracks were, which kind of, because everything is encapsulated within a dream, kind of worked for it. So it's like, kind of give it a pass on that. Oh, man.
Yeah, and then,
25-year-old game, it's not a spoiler.
Apologies to anybody listening to a podcast called Drink to the Past, talking about a Zelda game that came out 25 years ago, but we're going to casually discuss probably Zelda spoilers.
Right? More than 25. What was 1993?
Yeah, that'd be 27? Yeah.
I think it was 93. Yeah. Been out a while. If you haven't played it yet, go pick it up. It's available on 3 consoles. And what else have I played? Played a little more Clubhouse games with my kids. I've played most of the games in there now, I think. And all of them are pretty solid little party games, the multiplayer ones. I'm like, so if you're looking for a good party game for Switch, then I'd absolutely recommend it. It's pretty fun. And I've got a little bit more playing Last of Us 2, but not any significantly further than I was last time, because I went camping for 3 days in between again, so I've played like another hour or 2 hours or something of Last of Us 2. Haven't really accomplished much.
Okay.
But still pretty much like really digging the characters and stuff. And I had a conversation with somebody about this earlier today on Discord, and I think it's kind of interesting how like everybody praises the story of the first game, and now everybody's kind of like shitting on the story of this game, and I'm not really seeing a major difference, which is in the quality at least. But I think it's weird that people are saying like one of the big arguments against it is the whole story is driven by revenge, which is kind of true. There's a lot of revenge going on various parties, so that's a thing. But then I was like I was thinking about the story of the first game, and really you could sum up the story of the first game in 2 sentences. And you could do the same thing for The Last of Us 2 in 2 sentences, I think. And
I think that's fair for...
I don't think the story is the big selling point of these games in the way that people think they are. Because these games are not heavy story games. These games are heavy character games. You're there to get invested in the character, see how the characters interact in the, clusterfuck of a world they've been thrust into, and, see how they get out of it.
So,
and all those human moments in between, which I think are orchestrated beautifully in both games.
And keep in mind, I haven't played these games at all. Mm-hmm. I am not invested in them in the slightest. But when I do listen to complaints, the complaint I've heard isn't just that the game is about revenge. It's about how the character's quest for revenge is, doesn't really make sense, and as a result you don't end up caring about any of the characters. And if you don't have a story where I'm expecting that you probably feel different, but if you don't care about the characters in a story, whether that's story centric or character centric, you're not going to have much of a story.
What I would say to that is that their motivations for doing the things they do are not what make them good characters. What makes them good characters is the other interactions that they have when they're on their own or with other characters, or what they do, as character. It's another thing that I feel like people are taking the overarching, this is the story, or this is what all the character does. It's not what the character does. It's how the character is in these little human moments that you see sprinkled throughout the story. And a lot of these are even optional. Like, I've found just by exploring places, like looking for loot and stuff, I'm just like, oh, I need more supplies to build medkits. And I end up, finding this bonus cutscene where, these 2 characters have a really cool moment together, or something like that. And that's where this story shines. It's, I don't think it has the same kind of presentation as a lot of other stories. Because, one of the examples that the person I was talking to was talking about is one of his favorite stories was Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which has this very long, complex, slightly kerfuffled anime kind of story, right? And my thing there was you're comparing apples and oranges, right? You're comparing this thing that's supposed to be a grand epic thing that happens over the course of 120 hours. You're exploring, multiple continents, finding worldwide effects on what's going on in the politics and the main villain's dastardly plans and things like that. And that's not what The Last of Us is about. The Last of Us is about a more centralized look directly at these characters and their little interactions. It's on a micro scale instead of a macro scale. And I feel like people are looking at it at a macro scale and being like, the general idea of the story is not good. And it's I don't feel like you can say that unless you will say that about The Last of Us 1.
I think that's summed up some of the criticism I've heard. But the other criticism where they say, I don't like these characters, is it's not really a criticism so much as it is if someone's I don't like these characters,
that's fine.
Then
everybody's gonna like different characters for different reasons. That's fine.
Yeah.
I feel like people are being overly harsh on a game that they're looking at through the wrong lens. I think a lot of cases. Not all cases. Some people aren't going to like it. That's fine. But I feel like people that are butthurt about it are, mostly just, I
think
reading up, one spoilerific article on what happens and making their entire opinion on that.
I think what's actually happening is people are playing the game. They're deciding they don't like it, and when they go to criticize it, they're not really able to draw on the actual reasons they dislike it. So they come up with something that is like vaguely in the same direction as why they don't like it. So, and they criticize it based on that. So it's like if you have a gut reaction to something where you're just like, I don't like it, you might have trouble digging out why you don't like something.
Right.
That's typically, and you can I guess people can be wrong about why they feel a way about something. They can draw the wrong conclusion.
Yeah. Anywho, shall we get into the Nooz'n'Booz?
Sure.
Cool. So, first piece of Nooz'n'Booz we got here is Far Cry 6 has been announced, and it will feature Giancarlo Esposito, who you might remember from Breaking Bad, or was more recently in a smaller role, but seems like he's going to be very important in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. So, I'm kind of excited to see him. The trailer looked really badass for this game. Like, I haven't played a Far Cry since whatever Far Cry game was on the Wii. But now
let me see what Far Cry.
Okay, I might get into this again. It looks like it's got a really interesting kind of story. I think Giancarlo Esposito is like the bad guy who's like this president dude who has an iron grip on the people, is what it seems like. So, and this dude plays a villain marvelously. So I'm like, okay, I could get behind this.
And
go ahead.
I did have to look up who Giancarlo Esposito was before this podcast, but yeah, Gus Fring.
Yeah.
He's a evil fried chicken dealer.
Los pollos hermanos.
Which is a sentence I never thought I would say.
Right? Doesn't come up much. Yeah, so, you played much Far Cry, Chris?
No, Far Cry 3 was a game I looked at quite a while ago and thought I might be interested in, but never took the plunge.
Yeah,
the fact that
I don't
a lot
think
of those
I
games
ever
are on.
played any of the story for Far Cry. I think Far Cry 3 was the one on the Wii, but I'm not 100% sure. But mostly me and my brother played the multiplayer and ran around. It's like it puts you on an island and you run around and shoot each other. So it was fun. That's all I remember. That was my Far Cry experience. So it's probably far from a Far Cry fan, but this one looks cool, so I might check it out. Next piece of Nooz'n'Booz, there was a Google Stadia event that nobody knew about, because, like, I was thinking about this. I'm like, I get Google notifications on gaming news all the time. It's like, hey, here's a Smash Bros. Rumor. Here's a whatever, Xbox is discontinued the... Oh, that's another thing we could go over, is Xbox discontinued 2 of their Xbox models, probably in preparation for starting to produce Xbox Series X. But that's not the piece of Nooz'n'Booz. Anyways, they could have advertised this all over the place, and I never heard a thing about it until, like, after it had already happened. I saw somebody be like, oh man, that Stadia event was crap. And I was like, there was a Stadia event? So it sounds like it was more or less a Nintendo Direct, but done by Google for Stadia. So the announcements included Super Bomberman R, Dead by Daylight, some 2K sports games, and Sekiro are all coming to Stadia sometime within the next year. And also an indie-ish looking exclusive game, Outcasters. And now, here's the weird thing, is that they have one game that is exclusive. All the rest of these games are available on other consoles and or PC. And Outcasters is, like, it looks like an indie game. This is not, like, it doesn't look like a bad game, but this is not a console seller. And this is the first Google Stadia exclusive game, is what I think I read on Polygon or something. And I'm like, they have one exclusive game now after they've been out for like 9 months.
Yeah, I'm not sure I really understand their business model.
I don't understand their business model at all, especially since they have... Because I thought some of the other games might have been, like, exclusive, but apparently this is the first one. I'm like, wait, really? This is it? Like, you couldn't have got, like Google has all the money, right? Google could have, made a company produce a AAA-looking game, theoretically.
I think the other example of Google has all the money we're seeing is Google can make a project like this come to fruition and live for way longer than any other company could.
Yeah.
Keeping it on life support with those Google dollars.
You would think that they could figure out a way to make money off of it indefinitely if they would just dedicate the time to making the product not suck. Like, Google, the actual search engine, Google, where they originated, is still the best search engine.
Yeah,
why can't they do that again with anything else that they make?
I don't know. Maybe there might be some further topic about how having money doesn't equal
budget doesn't make good games and or
doesn't make
products,
good business decisions necessarily, or good creative decisions.
Yeah,
particularly that second one. But I don't know. Hard for me to speculate at their motives.
Right. So, Chris, are you getting Stadia? Didn't think so.
I have a PC that runs fairly well. I think I'll continue to.
Yeah, because you could buy games on Stadia and have to pay a monthly subscription, or you could buy games on Steam and not have to pay a monthly subscription. And I mean, I guess you're not streaming them, you're, playing them off of your computer, but that's way better at the moment.
Yeah, I have a computer that can handle performance-intensive games, but the games they're bringing on board aren't that performance-intensive. Even Dead by Daylight, with its unoptimized quality, could be run by plenty of laptops.
Right. Like, I think the most performance-intensive game that I think they have is probably Doom Eternal. I could be wrong. I'd have to look at a full list again to be sure of that. But Doom Eternal is a relatively... But Doom Eternal can run on Switch, right? I mean, in theory. The port hasn't come out yet, but...
And if you buy a Switch, you can also pick up such games as Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, or Super Smash Brothers, which Super Smash Brothers has better online than fucking Stadia. How does Stadia have worse online than Smash Brothers? That doesn't make any fucking sense. I just realized that. I'm like, Smash Brothers is like notorious for bad online, and it's still a better experience than playing any game on Stadia.
Maybe this is just a trial run for a Google concept, and they'll kill this, and then they'll come back with something that is actually, functional in a business sense.
Right.
In a couple of years' time.
Right. Well, there's another streaming service that's coming out. Let's segue into that piece of news and booze. Is Project xCloud will be launching later this year in September, I believe, and it will be rolled into Xbox Game Pass for no additional cost. So if you're an Xbox Games with Gold subscriber already, at the highest tier, you just get xCloud. You can just stream all of their games that they put on xCloud, which will include Halo Infinite when it comes out in this holiday season sometime. So that also comes with, like, a much larger library than Stadia. So I'm pretty sure, like, if there's a Stadia killer, quote-unquote, it's gonna be this. Because this is, like, a much better deal, because it's literally a Netflix, but games. and Xbox has more cool exclusives like Halo. Which it's weird to say because I haven't got an Xbox One this generation because they have less good exclusives that are interesting to me than PlayStation or Nintendo, but they have more than Stadia because they have Halo. Halo is bigger than every game on Stadia put together. So, what do you think about that? Would you be interested in looking into this streaming service? Because I'm kind of interested in it because you don't even actually need a new Xbox to play it. You can stream stuff to your phone or PC. So I'm like, I might actually try this just on PC and see how it works. Can't be worse than Stadia.
If I was interested in playing Xbox games, if I saw like an Xbox exclusive I really wanted, I might be interested in getting that and streaming it to my PC, since that's where I do most of my gaming these days. Right. However, when I see something like this, it's like I just want to own it. I think it's more viable. I think it's
certainly a much better, like a more consumer friendly strategy than what Stadia is doing, because Stadia is like, here, you're paying for a subscription to use the games, and then you have to purchase the license for the games, which is essentially the same number of dollars as so like to play Doom Eternal, you'd have to pay $60 to quote unquote own Doom Eternal, even though you don't really own it because you can only access it as long as you're subscribed, and you have to pay the $10 a month or whatever it is. Whereas
I guess
you could literally just buy it on PC and play it forever.
Yeah. I guess the question with xCloud is whether if they're increasing the prices of Xbox Game Passes, and if they are increasing, and if they're not increasing the prices, what percentage of users they're expecting to pick this up for xCloud alone. And
yeah, I'm wondering if they'll have like a download option, because that I think would still be, I think having the download option would be a really good thing and would maybe make Stadia a more viable idea. Because if I could just download those games and play them, I think most of the games that I tried on Stadia would have been fine. But because I was stuck on streaming and the streaming quality is garbage, it just didn't fucking work.
Yeah, the quality of the product being bad will kill Stadia deader than anything else could.
Yeah. Anywho, shall we go into our last piece of news and booze here?
Yes.
The Lego NES has been revealed, which includes a controller, a cartridge that you can actually load into the console, and a TV. And the TV has a little crank on it, and you crank the crank, and Mario on the TV jumps on Goombas and over stuff. And it's like this little interactive like playset. I'm just like, dude, this is such a cool thing. As a Nintendo collector, I want it, but I don't want to spend $230 on something that my kids will smash to bits.
Yeah.
I'm like on the edge. I'm like, do I have a place up high enough that I could store it, display it, that they can't touch it? Probably not. My kids are clever. So, yeah, I probably won't get this, but man, I fucking want it. It looks so cool. Did you see the video or anything on that there, Chris?
Yeah, I did see the video on that. Well, it does look pretty cool. It's just kind of neat little setup there.
You big into Legos?
No, not so much. I was about to say I'm not much of a Lego guy. This probably won't change my mind on it, but I can definitely see the appeal. Yeah,
I'm like a Lego kid at heart that doesn't get the Lego stuff I want because the Lego stuff I want is like too fancy and display worthy, and my children will smash it. So instead I get little Lego sets and I build them with my kids, and that's tons of fun. And then they smash those and I don't care because they were like $5.
Smart.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I want it. It looks super cool. Oh my god, it's so cool. I want a Zelda one. I'm hoping for Zelda Legos now that they've kind of put their toe in the water of Lego. I'm like, okay, is Link coming out next? I want a giant... If they make a Hyrule Castle, I don't care. I'm fucking buying it.
Hyrule
I
Castle
will
might
build it and rebuild it as many times as my children smash it. So, that's that. Alright. Anywho, shall we get into our table topic, or do you have anything else to say about Legos?
Nope. Let's do this.
Cool. So, table topic. This.
I released 65.
Whoops. I typed incorrectly, so I have to take a drink. Do I have any more? A little tiny here. Yummy. Anyway. So, table topic this week is traveling around a large world versus returning to the same town and adventuring out of there. Because I feel like I've done both playstyles to an extent, but I don't know what it is as a DM, just I kind of automatically design every campaign I do to be like, you start in this town, and then you kind of just wander around, and I make like a world, kind of, partly just because I like making worlds to explore. I like making sandbox campaigns, but at the same time, I've never really done a campaign where you start in a town, and then you adventure out of there, and you come back to town, and you trade stuff, and you go back out, and you have another quest, and then you come back to the same town. But I've played in a lot of those kind of campaigns, and I just had this epiphany the other day that I've never once in my life run a campaign like that. So,
yeah, I guess maybe it's the influence of One Piece on you, or something like that.
Partially, yeah, and I love open world video games too. We'll get to that later, so stay tuned. But yeah, so I kind of make all of my games on the basis that players will leave the first town that they are in for whatever adventure they're in, and then I'll give them a plot hook or two to probably go somewhere else. And I never, almost ever, even return to the starting town. Occasionally, like, depending on, like, if it's kind of an interconnected world with a lot of politics, then maybe I'll have them revisit locations and do other kind of things. But then I kind of try to change it up. Like, in my Pirates campaign, one of the cities you went to was called Topalamask, which was like this gigantic city. It's like the biggest city in the world, and there's all sorts of people living there and trade going on, and there's a magic college, which is kind of strange because, like, nowhere in the world other than right there do people study magic very much. There's very little magic outside of that, like, city, basically, unless you find, like, another mage or something, which is... It's like a medium magic level campaign in general. But, yeah, they would occasionally come back to this city, and, like, the next time they came in, then they'd all be wanted, so they'd have to sneak around, or they'd be, have to escape once somebody found them out, or different things like that. So I always tried to keep it a little bit different, even when you are returning to the same place. And I think mostly I've been fairly successful in that, which is good. But I was kind of thinking about it, like, what if I just put them in that town so they've got literally everything at their disposal, and then, like, oh, you have this adventure over on the other continent. You go there, you do the adventure, and you come back. Or, you wander into the mainland, because this is a coastal town, and then you wander back, Do you think there's any advantage that I might have gained there in some sort of design like that, as opposed to you go all around the place wherever the fuck you want?
I think there is an advantage to having one major city that your players spend most of their time around and adventure in and out of, and that's conservation of detail. And that when you spend a lot of time in a place and it becomes more familiar to you, you as the DM have more time to pack it full of little details about how that town works. or like just little customs or like shops or whatever, and you can make it feel like its own kind of character. You can have like if you spend a lot of time in one city, you can have like intercity politics in a way that you couldn't if you're just going from place to place.
Right. And I kind of try to put into like macro scale politics, but that micro scale politics could be very interesting if you were doing it right too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of a cool little take on it.
You can have like little business rivals or a bartender that you have to avoid because you slept with his daughter and she got pregnant
right.
or whatever.
Hold on, I'm going to use that as your next drawback, right? Chris in this campaign has a drawback that, like, almost everywhere they go, he's made an enemy somehow. So in the last episode of our campaign, I literally made a side story where he had peed in the king's Cheerios.
Well, who's to say that the king didn't deserve it?
I don't know. He was murdered shortly thereafter, so, you know.
And it was not our fault.
Surprisingly.
Yeah, it was actively not our fault. We were actively trying to save his life.
Yeah.
But
you didn't know it was him.
Yeah.
But, because one of the things that I do have some trouble with occasionally is, like, when I'm putting you guys into a town, I'm, like, going through the process of making another, I try to make all my towns feel unique and interesting, and most of the time I feel like they do their job, but I'm not sure they're as unique and interesting as they could be, Because with this, one town, you can add layers and layers of detail every time they come back. Oh, there's a Bob's Fish Mart open down the way, whatever. But in a campaign like every one I've ever run, I'm literally having to make up a new semi-interesting town almost every session, at least every adventure, because you're like, we go to this town, and then we go to this town, and then we go to this town, and, there's stuff in between, but, usually every adventure you go to a different town. And occasionally you backtrack over one of the towns you've already been in or something, but the way that I make campaigns, you don't usually, if you do backtrack through these places, most of the time you don't, like, do anything there other than, like, stay at the inn and have a beer.
And I think it's fine for the type of campaign you're running, where we're pirates and we have pretty good incentive to move from place to place, to not let the law catch up with us on top of other things. But it lends itself to... We don't really have an extended relationship with any part of the city.
Right.
Or any part of the town that we're visiting. We go to a place and the mayor is a dick. Okay, well, he's only a dick here, so we don't have to care. Or we kill him and move on. It's not... And so if you wanted a more... Or if there's, like, a gang problem, you're not going to solve the gang problem in this town. It's just going to be a thing there. Or it's a small enough town that you can solve it, and that's all the adventure you could possibly get out of this town. Which is fine for, like, globetrotting, but it's just a kind of adventure that you wouldn't necessarily... A long-form kind of adventure or plot that you couldn't get out of the globetrotting style of game. Yeah,
I was thinking the closest I've ever come to this style, where you have kind of a hub world that you kind of retreat back to, is my Super Mobsters, where basically we made this. I made this campaign. You were supposed to make a session of that, you bastard, and you never did. Anyway.
Yeah, I had made a session, and then we decided to run something else, and then it never got picked up again.
Okay, well, if you've still got the notes for it, we should do that sometime.
I should find the notes for that.
Anywho, so, I created this basically as a playtesting system, more or less as a one-shot, but kind of an extended one-shot that would playtest over a few levels. So it's not necessarily that you're returning to the same town, but it's kind of a little bit of a larger scale adventure within the same town. So, what do you think about the efficacy of that? About having, like, you have an adventure in the town, and then that kind of leads to, oh, here's a larger, there's more stuff going on in the background, basically, is what ended up happening a lot of the time. Because basically, you started, like, trying to track down these mobsters in the campaign, and then you found that there was this whole conspiracy and that a lot of the mobsters had, like, corrupted the police, and then you had to sneak into the police station, which I think I, like, gave you the guys the plot hook. Okay, now you have to sneak into the police station to get some information on, like, who the real mob boss is or something. And your method of doing that was two of you, like, just murdered somebody in broad daylight and got arrested. Something like that. I forget exactly the detail. You did something stupid and got arrested.
That's about as subtle as we typically are.
Right, yeah. And then the other two of you were like, okay, yeah, we'll go visit them. And so you, like, dressed up in these lawyer suits and come in, and we're like the lawyers of these guys. Yeah, we want to come in. And the guards totally didn't believe you, so you just killed them anyway. But the way that I had imagined this campaign to go was actually totally different, because I imagined that you would, like, go into police HQ, which happens to have, the jail attached to it, and, you do some investigative work, but I made the police, like, there was, like, some of them were corrupt and some of them were, like, good guy police. And so, depending on who you asked what question, I made this whole cool detective campaign that you guys could have, like, role-played your way through. And if you asked the right guy the right question, then you would have got the answer you were looking for. And if you asked the wrong guy the right question, then he'd be like, lead you into a trap somehow, and do different things like that. So I made that's another great example of just the players never do what you fucking expect them to. That's another rabbit hole we could dive down.
Yeah.
Why was I talking about this?
You were talking about that being like an overarching part of the thing that was happening in the city of that campaign.
Yeah.
Because we were mostly in that one city.
Yeah.
From what I remember.
Yeah, because pretty much the story of this campaign was basically, okay, you guys are in New York in the 30s, and there's some mobsters and a police scandal. That's largely it. It was a little bit basic just to kind of, mostly I was, like, making up guys with new powers to playtest, basically, in our superhero system. And anyway... so what do you think about that style as, like, I guess you could insert that style technically into either one of these styles, or it could be its own thing as more or less a one-shot, though perhaps a one-shot that, like this one, takes place over a few levels.
Yeah. I think the impact, the long-term consequences, or the idea of long-term consequences for a hard, violent approach would need to be more present.
Mm.
And that's inherently harder to do if you can just skip town after blowing open the jail cells and releasing everybody.
Right, yeah, because, depending on what you guys do for the next episode, it'd like, oh, hold on, what if we run into the cops while we're trying to save the world or whatever?
Yeah. So, having some form of... first, you gotta be like, as DM, you need to figure out an effective way of communicating consequences for going loud in that sort of situation where you say, hey, this could have long-term repercussions if you just go in there and kill cops for your characters. Mm-hmm. Like, in the next sessions, you would be hunted by cops permanently. Do you want to do... you can just say that outright. Or you can... it also helps when characters are fragile enough that fighting is bad idea, which is less of the case in a lot of our games. Our characters tend to not be very fragile. They tend to be pretty able to stand their own in a fight for quite a while.
I feel like a large amount of the people in our group are power gamey enough that just kind of works no matter what they're doing. And even if they're not, like, super power gamed, they are savvy enough to know their weaknesses and, know tactically what the best course of action will probably be.
Yeah. So, when any fight can result in your death, that tends to mean players will not always resort to violence as quickly. Which, not appropriate for all games. Sometimes you're like, well, we don't, we want death to be a rarer occurrence, but...
Right.
Some form of long-term consequence that makes your life harder in a noticeable way that doesn't render the character unplayable.
Right.
So that would need to be paired. So that now we're into like a whole other topic, which is about making investigation seem like a more attractive path than getting into a fight. And I'm like, if you're a first level wizard in like D&D, or you're a first level anybody, a lot of the time, sometimes investigation can seem more attractive because you have one hit die and so do all your opponents.
Yeah, but there's usually more opponents than you. So unless you're in a party, like, okay, hold on, how do I wheel my way out of this?
Yeah, but once you're like,
hold on, guys, let me put on my plot armor.
Yeah, once you're at 5th level or something, suddenly you're able to survive that much more, and you can make a lot more certain plans to kill your way out of a situation.
Yeah.
But I think I've probably gotten off track here since this was about.
So yeah, you've done a handful of you have a hub-ish town and you come back to it more than me. Do you find that that's a better style than a free roam?
I wouldn't say better. I wouldn't use the word better. I would say it gives more chance for reusing characters and locations and getting more in-depth kind of histories. Like, if the characters burn down a quarter of the city, and that's the town that's like the city they live in, even if no one knows who did it, for the next 20 sessions, that quarter of the city has been burned down, and they're like doing construction work and rebuilding in it. And just having a little description where you say that, yeah, that stuff's going on, that adds a lot. It makes players feel like they had a lot of impact on the world.
Whereas in my characters' campaigns, they like burn down the city and then fucking leave.
Burn down the city, leave, and so it
douchebags
ends up being like we're not going back there.
Which is just hilarious because in my Pirates campaign, I think like literally 3 times you have burned something down and left.
Pirates are.
I think
pirates
2 houses in a forest. Well, a house, a pub, and a forest.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've certainly both got their advantages. I don't think necessarily that I'm going to change my ways as a DM and how I present campaigns. Just because I like giving the players the freedom to just be like, okay, we don't want to, worry about this town, or like, I don't want to be wanted here, or I don't want to deal with the politics. I don't like that, the mayor or some bullshit like that. Let's just leave.
I think, and here's a point where I'm going to disagree strongly with you, and I'm going to make a point that I think you might like. I think we're flipping this on its head. Even negative consequences sometimes are a good thing. They make the player feel like, oh shit, I caused all this? The police want me this badly?
Mm-hmm. That's a kind of a thing that can happen in my kind of campaigns sometimes, but I bet it's a lot less common.
Yeah.
Because the one example of when I can think that specifically happened is my Ragnarok campaign, where I kind of set up basically some cultists were going to try and incite Ragnarok, and then inadvertently, because of the politics going around, which I had given you all kind of like hey, here's a little bit of the politics, you could explore these if you want to, and nobody really did. Then I accidentally rolled on a table that you were wanted. So when you got back to town, you were wanted, and my brother Dan was playing with us, and he just said, oh no, it was spies from that country over there. And they took that to heart, and they attacked that country, and
so
he made Ragnarok happen instead of the cultists.
So we caused Ragnarok because he pointed them in the wrong direction.
Yeah, because he was just like
Pretty
trying to make up an excuse to get out of town and be like, okay, guys, we don't need to deal with this right now. Let's just skip town so Chris isn't, burned at the stake or something. And everybody was like, okay, and but it was so funny that I was like trying to point you guys to that town was like, there was like an alleged plan that they were going to attack, and then you came across a caravan that was like their guys, but then you realized that it was like imposters somehow, and then Daniel blamed it on them anyway.
Yeah.
So
it was
now
just
you guys have like
very
little idea exactly why these cultists are doing exactly what they're doing.
I would point to Ragnarok campaign as kind of an example of both, because while we go from town to town, we often revisit towns, and like when we go back to the main town that we came from, it can be changed in our absence.
Yeah, that's kind of what I try to do, because whatever you guys are doing, I kind of try to pay attention to what effect that has on the world, and also, once something is set in motion, I kind of think, what end will it see? So I'm like, okay, in some cases, like, literally the gods are going to war, because in this campaign, basically, one god rules every country, is kind of how the system of government works. So now there's like one god has like claimed a few other countries, starting with the original one that you told them to attack, which is the country of the god of wind. And the god of wind is a gigantic bird that just basically doesn't give a fuck about humans or mortals or whatever they're doing, and just kind of like flies around doing wind god stuff. He's a giant.
They're like, the bird in the sky told us to attack.
Yeah.
I really doubt that.
Yeah, basically when people ask him for counsel, he says, I don't care, why should you? It's kind of his character. The one time he really even saved his people was literally that, like, a Tarrasque had attacked the village, and he was like, okay, fine, I'll come kill the Tarrasque. So he came and he ate the Tarrasque. So that's like the thing that he's done, and the rest of the time he's just flying around like, I'm making the wind work. You're fucking welcome, you dicks.
Let's see. Do I have anything? Yeah, okay. So for my latest game, All People Carry a Light, has both villages that the players came from and spent a lot of time in, and also a lot of road travel. But idea is that those things could change as you were on the road for weeks or months.
Right.
And go back and forth between places.
Cool. Is there anything else we want to specifically say on this topic? Because I feel like we've kind of hit a lot of the major points. I guess we could have like a closing... Unless there's anything else you want to say specifically.
Nothing I want to say specifically, unless Nick decides to hop on randomly and give his opinion on this topic.
Nick, are you here? That would be random. So yeah, I guess basically I feel like both of them are very viable. Whoa. That's not... Huh.
Hey, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
But what topic?
It's, the topic is single city that players continually return to and kind of live out of, versus more of a globetrotting campaign where people rarely, if ever, see the same location and just go from location to location having adventures, which is the preferred approach, and which is pros and cons.
That is a huge topic.
Yeah. And we went on several sidetracks about that already.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure which sidetracks you went down, but I guess my 2 cents is those really cater to 2 separate kinds of games. I think you might be best served if you actually bundle both of those together in a longer campaign arc. Like, there's like a main hub that people may return to and invest their like fucks to give in. But then you can also have other, strings of pearls, per se, cities to go to and explore. But it's like, how much are you as a DM willing to prepare? Make it good.
And I think that...
Yeah, that's a big topic.
That's kind of like what Sean and I just talked about with the kind of both thing that we were talking about earlier. So yeah.
Yeah, they're both
I would
viable.
personally lean towards hub.
Yeah. Hub of adventure.
Yeah, and it's funny that you lean towards hub, and I picked this topic because I've literally never done that.
Really?
Yeah, not once as a DM. Every DM campaign I come up with, I make a starting town, and then you go to the next area and you do something else, and it eventually puts you on a track to somewhere else again. And you just keep wandering around. And every now and then, some of my campaigns have wandered back upon the trail, like, okay, now it would be appropriate to reintroduce this town or whatever.
Right.
But I've never done a campaign where you had a hub town that you return to.
I typically prefer hosting sandbox games, and that's just a lot easier to do with a hub town. I know I used to do a more narrative style, and it was definitely you go from point A to B to C and so on and so forth, but there was a lot less things they could do. My current setup's like, here's the hub, and then here's all these activities you can do, and also you care about the hub.
Right. Because I make sandbox campaigns too, but I don't use a hub. I use kind of like, once you've done whatever quest you were on, I give you a handful of different options, or if there's like a specific thing that I'm like, okay, this is the thing that makes most sense to do, then that's the plot hook I'll give, or whatever. And then you'll wander into, whatever towns are in between, and I'll usually make up an adventure for every town or in between while you're adventuring or something like that. So yeah,
that's the way you're good. It's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
If you're going to go that route.
Mm-hmm.
I just find it hard with preparation time and having a whole bunch of cities, because you look at a map, right?
Mm-hmm.
You make out your little world, you dot all your cities, and you're like, this is the capital of this nation, this is the capital of this nation, this is these little in-between places, and this is a special fortress, and this is this weird temple place full of temples, yada, yada, yada. It's like, oh god, how much of that do you want to prepare? I like my sand to be deep, so that people can like really dig into an area, and my preparation time is devoted to that.
And this is the conservation of detail thing I was talking about earlier, where
boom.
Where it's, you can prepare You can prepare a single city and like the surrounding locales. You can prepare a string of cities. You could even prepare like a whole galactic sector, but you're going to be spending about the same amount of preparation time on each one, which means detail is necessarily spread thinner the bigger you go.
Yeah. So kind of the way I do it is that I don't really... I make a fair-sized world, and I name all the cities, and I think of maybe a handful of them as important, quote-unquote, cities. That's like, okay, this will be the capital of this town, this will be, you know, a big trade center or something, and something like that. And that's all the detail I do at first. And then all of my detail, like the meat, I detail as we're playing. Like, okay, you know, once we're actually going to this city, then I will make a session around it. I will make, you know, NPCs that are in the bar. I'll make, you know, there's a couple of quest hooks here, there's a dungeon over here or something, and so I really do all my prep work session by session by session, and that's kind of the way that I just do my prep work. I don't do all of the prep work at once and say, this is the campaign, because I feel like doing that makes it so that I'm writing the story, and I don't want to write the story. I want to present a world in which the characters can make their own story.
Amen to that. But yeah, I think that's what you just said is the only way you can do like string of locations. It's like, all right, where are you going to go next? Oh, you're going there? All right.
Yeah.
End of session. See you next week. I got some stuff to prepare.
Right.
The anal beads method of DM preparation.
I said string of pearls, damn it. I was referring to
I said
something
what I
else
said.
entirely.
You said what you said.
Did he say anal beads before I
Jeff
got here?
Bridges, that's a guy in your profile picture. I'm trying to remember his fucking name. I'm like, who is that guy? It's the guy, but it's...
What was his name? Rooster Cogburn?
Yeah. Because it was John Wayne first.
Yeah.
And then it was Jeff Bridges.
It was Jeff Bridges and was that a remake or a sequel?
Remake.
Okay.
Pretty sure. I saw both of them at some point, and then I forgot most of the details of both of them.
Yeah.
You know, that's how that goes. The Big Lebowski was also good. That had Jeff Bridges.
Yeah. I like that movie.
All right. Is that all we have for this topic?
I think that's all I had to say.
All right. So both things are good. Do whichever works for you. All right.
Thanks for hopping on, Nick.
Yeah. Would you like to stick around for our video game topic?
I'll stick around until I'm bored.
All right. So our video game topic for today is open world versus linear world design in video games. So it's kind of adjacent to what we're talking about here, because a lot of linear games kind of go along this way of like, let's have a hub world that you kind of return to, which I feel like started almost in Ocarina of Time, where you had, or maybe even Mario 64, you could argue, but then Ocarina of Time really made it feel more like a world, and like the hub portion was obviously Hyrule Field, whereas Mario 64 was like, your hub is like the castle, and then the paintings are the different ways that you can go to teleport to other worlds. And those are differing... There's a lot of things I could say about that. But, so I guess we could almost use hub world as its own kind of thing, because some linear games use a hub and some don't.
Yeah. So, in terms of open world games, or games with a hub world that have like a lot of locations, you have to prepare. Unlike D&D, unlike tabletop RPGs, you have to prepare the content for anywhere the player character might be able to go.
Mm-hmm.
Which seems obvious, but presents a lot of difficulties. It's however big you make the world, you have to fill all of that in, and you can't improvise on any of it because that's just not a thing with video games.
Right.
So, open worlds aren't necessarily the best choice for every style of game.
Yeah.
Which, again, I feel like I'm stating a bunch of obvious things. Linear games are perfectly fine.
So here's a question then. If we look at Dark Souls, would you consider it a linear game or an open world game?
I would consider Dark Souls not quite a linear game because of all of the interconnectedness of the areas and how it was filled in. But it does tend to push you along a path, particularly early on, because of how fucking scary the enemies are in other areas.
Yeah, and it's kind of like Metroid or something, where it's like you have a quote-unquote correct way to go, but you have many paths to get there, right? It's sort of how Dark Souls works. It's sort of how Metroid works. And a game that I would compare both of those to is Skyrim, which everybody will basically tell you is an open world game, but there's a correct place to go and a bunch of incorrect places to go. And going to the incorrect places will maybe give you a side quest sometimes, but 99% of the time in Skyrim, like, going off the beaten path is pointless as shit. So I would call that a linear open world. It's like it has it has an open world, but the actual story structure and the way that you go through this world is linear.
As opposed to, say, Breath of the Wild, where you could literally run to the final boss after getting finished with the plateau.
Yeah, I did that once.
And get your ass kicked by the White Ganons.
Yeah, I did that too.
Or you could go throughout the game and do the plot events basically in any order.
Yeah.
So,
and that's one of the things that I think Breath of the Wild really excels at, specifically, is the world design, because you have set points to go like you would in any open world game.
Traditional open world.
Yeah, but the thing about Breath of the Wild is that there's not a correct path to take, right? Because even if you had a specific order, if you had to do every, one dungeon and then the other dungeon and then the other dungeon and then the other dungeon, you would still have almost an infinite number of paths to go between wherever you were and that other dungeon. And there's, side quests in between. There's plenty of world to explore in between for collectibles and stuff. And so I feel like the world design there really lends itself more to the open world kind of idea. Like, even in the starting area, there's just a ton of stuff to do, right? And most games don't have that. Most games are like, okay, you are here, and now the next place you have to go is here. And usually there's a trail there. Sometimes there's not, and sometimes you can go off the beaten trail, but it never helps you. Which is one of my big complaints about Skyrim. Because, not that I dislike Skyrim by any means, but I do knock on it a lot because I wanted another Morrowind and I didn't get it. And I'm a spoiled dick. Because Morrowind
Don't want to
also
go off
did
on
that.
a tangent, but I think I disagree about your analysis of Skyrim there.
Okay.
I found lots of joy in going off the beaten path in that game.
yeah, I'm with Nick on this one, but I had a lot of fun not pursuing... The story is written... The main story is written in a linear way, but in terms of... the main story is bad. But in terms of all the other things you can do or quests you can pursue, it really is just it's almost kind of relaxing in a Minecraft sort of way in terms of just going off and doing something else and being left up to your own devices, going to random dungeons or getting in fights with bears or whatever.
I felt
Getting
like
yourself
to an
killed by
extent
something you
that
can't hurt.
kind of worked okay, but I feel like coming from Morrowind, it was like they already did themselves 8,000 times better. Because in Morrowind, literally everything you did was that way. You know, you would... It really helped also that you never had quest markers or anything, which is, you know, weird, because I generally am okay with quest markers as a thing in games, but, like, one of the coolest things about Morrowind was looking through your journal and being like, okay, how did that guy describe it? It's east out of town, and then you turn left at this mountain or something when the trees end. And it's like stuff like that that really makes you, like, looking for stuff. It feels like more of an adventure. Plus the fact that Morrowind was 8 million times bigger and had 8 million times more stuff in it. There's just, like, dungeons everywhere. And some of them have a quest associated with them. Some of them, I'm pretty sure, are just, like, ruins for no reason as far as the game goes. You know, it's like, the reason is that they wanted to put ruins there. There's probably maybe a lore reason or something.
Ruins. As a gameplay thing, I love pointless ruins.
Right, yeah,
as a like a world building thing, they don't really add that
much. It depends,
much,
because
especially
like some of them like would have some. They wouldn't be pointless. They might be. I call them pointless. I mean, like, you don't have a quest to go there or any major treasure to find. But some of them are like, you'll go in there and then you might discover, like, there was some cultists, a bandit camp here. There's, you know, you might just have a little inkling into the lore of the world. There's, you know, this is built by the Dwemer ancient civilizations ago.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And Skyrim is almost entirely devoid of that. Every dungeon has a quest, and
locks you out if you don't have it half the time.
A lot of the time, yeah. And it's just like, it feels so much less interesting to explore to me.
You can't stumble into the middle of something, accidentally start a quest where, like, somebody's daughter's been kidnapped.
Yeah, it wasn't
like,
quite as bad as...
kill her. I know you've been hired by this person. Like, I'm just here in this dungeon, and I don't even know who that is. I'm going to shoot you in the face.
Right.
I mean, I definitely had that same experience a lot in Skyrim, though, like, especially, like, endish game when most of the quests or whatever were done. I'm just look at the map and like, all right, what hasn't been filled in? And I'd go there and just bumble around and keep finding actual dungeons with just that feel pointless, but you know, like the northern frosty coast, like exploring that whole thing. There's all sorts of weird shit up there.
Like
maybe not weird, but
my problem with that is that that's exactly what I did in Morrowind, and after like 150 hours, I still had maybe a third of the map filled in, and after like 50 hours, mostly doing the main story while occasionally exploring other stuff, I had almost the whole map filled in Skyrim. It's just, it felt so
smaller.
Yeah, and I felt like it wasn't just smaller. None of the stuff felt as satisfying to explore, and I guess that's maybe a personal thing, and
that's maybe after 150 hours of exploring Morrowind, like you're gonna get some burnout on that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's happened to me too many times.
But the combat was good. Combat was a lot better than Morrowind. Morrowind combat was not very good.
I actually, the one time I played Morrowind, I started up like a fisticuffs dark elf, and I did not know what I was doing or how to play that game, and it was painful.
That's why I want Skywind to come out at some point in our lifetime, so that I can get the experience of playing Morrowind, but with Skyrim combat.
I will pay a lot of money for that.
It's a fan project, so I don't think they're legally allowed to accept money for that.
Basically, yeah, because I heard that basically Bethesda was like, we're not going to sue you or shut you down, but you have to make all your own assets.
Aww.
So hopefully that'll eventually happen. I'm like, dude, why doesn't Bethesda just, like, give them a buttload of money to make this happen? Because they know fucking fans want it, right? Fans will easily
certainly
pay
want it more
the
than
regular
enhanced edition or whatever
for this. I feel like I don't know. I would pay more than $60 for that. For HD fucking Morrowind. I'd fucking
HD, yeah.
HD Morrowind,
HD Morrowind with Skyrim combat.
Skyrim combat, yeah.
And no other changes.
Yeah. That's all they
But
have
the
to
combat's not that good. Never mind.
do. I don't know. The Skyrim
compared
combat
to-
I thought was pretty fun. Compared to Morrowind, I
Compared-
really
Compared to Morrowind combat.
Yeah.
I mean, Skyrim combat was like inventory juggling and like stat comparisons.
As opposed to percentage-based trying to hit a thing and missing.
Oh, I
when
mean,
you-
yeah,
and
if we're
also
comparing it to
having the
Morrowind, it's an
same
improvement.
Yeah,
inventory
that's-
juggling, only worse
That's
because
what we're
you could
comparing.
carry a lot more stuff.
Well, in the higher
Skyrim.
difficulties, it's like, all right, what potion do I have that helps me with this situation? Or what is my daily ability for my race? Ooh, that I can use that.
That was one of the nice things about Morrowind is you could just carry like as many potions as you wanted because they were not as many, but they weren't very heavy, so you could carry a lot of them. So I'd like as my like berserker guy, I would like carry a buttload of Sujama. And just like, oh, I came into an enemy I don't feel like fighting very much, or a big boss or something. I'm like, okay, and it was funny. I actually went into Vivek, who is like, there's a city named after him. He's like this sub-deity guy that's like a very important story-centric character, and I really just hated the layout of his city, and that was the only reason I decided to kill him. But I go into his room.
It let you kill Vivek?
I did. It was funny because my brother, as a challenge, decided after he was done with the game that he was going to try and do this, and he came up with this giant strategy, and he's like, throwing fireballs and dodging his attacks and doing all sorts of stuff, and he's like, oh yeah, I fought him for like 20 minutes before I finally took him down. I'm like, okay, I bet I could beat that, and I go into Vivek's room, I go right up to him, I drink 47 bottles of Sujama, and I fucking hit him with my sword, and he died. One fucking shot. Fuck you.
Sounds like what John did in my game with some mushrooms.
Oh,
One
you
shot a
mean
mountain.
Stairs' ridiculous power level?
Yeah. I mean, it's been nerfed now. Okay, context. One of the players in my game was doing something conniving under my nose. He was collecting buffs that doubled damage. I have now learned that multiplicative things should not be put into games, but he combined, I think, 2 or 3 things that double your damage, as well as just straight damage boosts. And he whomped on something for like 450 damage in one round. For context, a max level fighter has around 70 hit points. So he pretty much just golfed a gigantic earth elemental out of town like it was nothing.
Nice.
He
why
got
we put-
hollow for that.
So
That's why we
anyways,
put buffs on him.
back to the topic a little bit. So do you guys have any particular games that you like with a linear world design, and what do you like about those games?
Let me open up my game box here.
I think. Well, and I probably should have brought this up a long time ago, but linear world design versus open world design is more a spectrum than anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think of Link's Awakening as having a linear, not just a linear story, but having a linear progression in the way areas open up in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in terms of exploring those areas after that, it's open. But
Right.
in terms of the way getting to certain locations is...
That's kind of a thing that a lot of
That's very
2D Zeldas kind of do, that it's like, okay, now you have this item, now you can go to that area by, oh, you got the power bracelet, you can lift the rock out of the way and go to that area. You have the hook shot now, you can go over that river. Stuff like that is a really big trope in Zelda world design. Link's Awakening, I think I did it a little better than most games. Just because, like, it would open up usually a couple of different areas, and then you would still kind of have to trek back to these areas at some point when you got the next item or stuff. So you still, it didn't, like, just open up, like one of the, I think a bad example of this is in Minish Cap, where literally it was like, you go into this box on Hyrule Field, and there's a rock at this end. And then once you get the power bracelet, you lift that rock, and you go to the next box. And then when you're in that box, there's a fancy rock, and you have to charge through it with the Pegasus boots. And so once you get the Pegasus boots, you can go through that. And then you get to another box, and you use the Gust Jar or some bullshit. It's like every single time you're like, okay, now I see the area where I can't go, and I don't know what item will get me there, but I know that as soon as I beat the dungeon, I'll come back to right that spot. So, it Link's Awakening, I see what you're saying, but it felt more open, and you had more reason to re-explore areas than in some Zelda games. Beer.
Now I'm starting to wonder how you even define a linear game. Like, I'm looking at my list here, and the only one I would consider linear is Undertale.
What about Binding of Isaac? Or Enter the Gungeon? True, they have non-linear levels.
I wouldn't call those linear.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't really have the chance to go back.
Well,
And
the gameplay
pretty small, finite
takes place in non-linear stages, even if the arc of the story is linear.
Okay. Half-Life? Maybe?
Never played it.
Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy.
Never played it.
Oh yeah, you did
Super
never play
Mario Brothers.
Oh yeah, those are linear,
That
aren't
is a
they?
linear game.
Yeah.
Some of
I
the
can't-
games, like Super Mario 64, obviously has some amount of exploration in between the levels. Mario Odyssey is basically a lot of small open world areas that you travel between. So it's not every Mario game, but a lot of them are pretty linear.
Well, the side scrollers.
Unrailed.
That is a linear game. But
It is
yeah, I
linear.
think linear games benefit from just having challenges you have to overcome in sequential order, and that's pretty much all they're built around.
Mhm.
Whereas, open games are more like exploring to find things that help you achieve your goals.
Mhm.
And while there's plenty of examples of games that have some amount of exploration in them, there's not. It seems much more difficult to find games that are truly linear. There are plenty of games that are truly linear, but they seem much rarer.
Mhm.
Maybe a lot of side-scrolling beat 'em ups I'd count as linear, like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the movie, the game,
Mhm.
or Castle Crashers, or River City Girls.
I think of linear a different way than you guys, I think, because when I think of a linear game, I think of Skyward Sword or Majora's Mask, where, sure, there's some explorable bits, but largely you're going from point A to B to C to D. And, like in Majora's Mask, you can go and determine a field, but then you can explore the whole thing, and there's literally like 2 secrets in it that you can get maybe at the start of the game, and then that's it. And you have
there's
to
way
go
more
to the
secrets than
swamp. Well, not that you can get right away. As you go through the game and get more items,
Yeah.
more masks, then you can get more secrets. And maybe that's not including as many of the secret masks as I'm thinking of. But anyway, you get my point, right? There's not a ton you can do, and then you have to go to the swamp first, and then you go to the swamp, and the swamp is a relatively linear area, even though there's some exploration in it. And then you go to the dungeon, which is a dungeon, has some exploration
Sounds
in
like
it.
Link's Awakening.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah.
And I also think
I feel a fair amount of Zelda games kind of fit under this umbrella,
Majora's
but
Mask
some are
has-
more open than others, especially
Majora's-
obviously Breath of the Wild.
Majora's Mask has much more going on in the side quest department.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, there's a lot more optional content you can do
Yeah.
that has a lot in depth that you're just free to totally ignore, not explore.
Mm-hmm.
That you can miss if you're at the wrong point in the cycle. So, and I feel like that's a lot of the draw of the game. So I think, yeah, it has the Link's Awakening thing going on with it, but it also has quite a bit more in the way of side quests,
Yeah.
which I feel like is a large part of the draw of the game.
Mm. Yeah, I feel like that's probably true. Another linear game that I was thinking of that I brought up earlier was The Last of Us. And The Last of Us 2 are both pretty linear. The first one is like really, really linear. Like most of the game is pretty much on a set path, and you have to figure out what to do and overcome the combat or stealth challenges depending on which way you like to play the game more, or some combination of both is what I usually do. Like I'd usually like stealth kill as many guys as I could until I got caught, and then I'd shoot off the rest of them. But Last of Us 2 kind of takes the same idea, but then makes the areas kind of bigger and doesn't make one set path from the start to the end like the first one did. So there's a lot more like, oh, I can go into this building. And then you find lots of different kinds of stuff, like, oh, here's an old bar, I might find this kind of supply here. Here's an old music shop, I might find this kind of supply there. And then you find, like I was saying earlier, there's like extra cutscenes you can find and stuff if you're in the right place at the right part of the game and stuff like that. So both of those are linear experiences, and what I think they benefit from most has nothing to do with gameplay and is all about the story, because it really is. The first one particularly is almost just like watching a movie, right? And you're like just doing the middle bits. It's like, okay, you're getting from point A to point B, and then you're watching basically what happens with the characters, and sometimes along the way, because there's a lot of dialogue along the way in both games, where just like your characters will have banter, or they'll like the characters that you're like trying to sneak around will be talking to each other. The second game is actually kind of cool about that, because like every random guy you find has a name, and like if you kill a guy and some like the other enemies come over his body, they'll be like, oh gosh, Ethan's dead, or whatever his name is. So it's kind of cool like that.
Sergio, he's dead.
Yeah. It's one of those things that it's like, okay, we're actually kind of fighting, a semi-real war. The people on the other side, they know each other. They're probably bros like the rest of us, something along those lines. So, what do you think about the impact of a story in a linear versus open world design?
Immersive storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to tell a traditional story in a more linear game.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of storytelling in an open world game, you got to rely on a lot of that environmental storytelling, as Nick was
ambient storytelling.
waving his hand in the direction of.
Accurate.
Like Breath of the Wild's memories and being able to slowly piece together knowledge of your previous self.
Yeah.
Man, I'm glad Breath of the Wild exists. It makes this conversation very easy to flow with.
Right, yeah. Because it's funny how, like, I feel like the one thing that was really negatively received about Breath of the Wild is its story. And it's one of the things that I love the most about Breath of the Wild, because not that the story is so great, it's an okay story, but the way that it is presented, I feel like lends itself much better to an open world game than a traditional story. Because again, we'll go back to Skyrim. The story is, you start at point A, you go to point B, C, D, E, until you kill the fucking dragon. Whoop-de-fuck. Right? It's effectively the same presentation of every story that has ever been told. You start at one place and you go to another. But Breath of the Wild has pieces of the story that you can find in different orders. Pieces of the story that you might even skip over right the first time, or some people don't even give a shit about the memories and stuff, just go for the dungeons, call it good, right? So I feel like Breath of the Wild has this perfect blend of non-linear story presentation, and maybe it could add a little more detail, do a few things a little differently, maybe it would even be better. But I think it really went the extra mile to making an open world experience that was better. It's I feel like it felt more like an open world experience than Skyrim, because the story was presented as part of the open world experience. It wasn't just tacked on because they have to have a story. It was integrated into a core aspect of the gameplay.
I think a big part of that is just because the entire world of Breath of the Wild is the dungeon. It was built as a dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have your rooms with shopkeepers, which are your towns. You have your rooms with monsters. Like, it's the world dungeon.
Interesting way to
And
look at
that is also why it feels like it's so open world, is because, you know, you can just go anywhere in this world dungeon. There's no walls, but there is limitations and yada, yada, yada. And then you can piece the story together as you explore it, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Skyrim is definitely lines connecting points with fun little bits spread in between. So it's like almost like a mesh layered on top of a world dungeon.
Right.
Whereas Breath of the Wild is just pure world dungeon.
Yeah. But I feel like the way that game developers can get out of the stagnation that has become storytelling in open world games is to follow something like Breath of the Wild's example, and to really integrate the story with gameplay rather than just have it be almost a separate thing from gameplay.
Or make more story generators.
Like Dwarf Fortress.
And RimWorld.
Yeah.
Yes, also that.
All right, is there anything else we want to say on
The hub.
Open world versus linear world design?
I think I've run out of things to say.
I guess we could
Have one
touch
thing
vaguely
that's
on
like
hubs as well, because we didn't talk about them as much. But go ahead, Nick.
it's kind of esoteric, but it's kind of like how you define the hub. And this is a conversation I got into with our friend Matt, but basically you want to base your game, video or not, at a place that is safe, that is normal, or at least as safe or normal as that world entails, giving them essentially a place to breathe before they head out into the weird.
Having a relative safe zone is a good
You
thing.
can have different hubs, but when you have a hub set up like that, it kind of provides pacing. You know, you don't want to be high tension all the time.
That's
Or-
even why old school survival games had like safe rooms.
Right.
So it's the
Old school
weird
survival-
versus the normal.
Survival horror games had like safe rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Even in storytelling, you don't want your hub to be as interesting as all the other places. Like,
Have you ever read a story where things happened and then they just kept on happening and it never let up, not even for a chapter, and you just kind of got exhausted?
exactly.
Yeah.
So Hyrule Field is that hub. It's the normal. There's nothing too weird there besides the fucking helicopters of death.
Yay, pea hats.
It's a big, normal field. It's not too threatening. That's what makes it a effective hub.
Yeah.
It's normal. The weird stuff's in the dungeons and the nooks and crannies of the world.
I think one of the most effective things about that in Ocarina of Time as well was that it didn't feel like it was linear, even though it was linear, but it didn't feel like it was, because once you were in Hyrule Field, you could
Quantum
go
Ogre.
like to several places. You could go to Kakariko Village and talk to people and do some side quests. You could go to the ranch and do some side quests. You could go, part of the way to Zora's domain or part of the way through the desert. And obviously those areas open up later, but it felt like at the time it was literally the most open world a game had
As
been
of 97.
in 3D. Yeah, so I think, and they had a lot of really cool design choices as well, because there was a quote-unquote correct path, but you could go off of it, like, in a lot of different ways, especially once you got to the adult era. It's like, you could do multiple dungeons out of order. There's a lot of orders that you could do the dungeons in. I often just go to the Fire Temple before I go to the Forest Temple anymore when I replay that game, just because I can, because I'm like, yeah, it's fun. I like the Fire Temple. And stuff like that. So, I think that was real clever about the way that they did that there. But yeah, what you're saying, I think is kind of right. Another big world or hub world though that people talk up a lot is God of War, the new one on PS4. I don't know if either of you have played that.
Nope.
No.
Yeah. But I thought that one wasn't quite as effective because it's a different kind of hub world where, like, when you're in the hub world, it's called the Lake of the Nine, basically, and you sail around in a boat, and you can go to different islands on the lake. There's a middle area where there's a blacksmith guy that can upgrade your equipment, and basically the only thing to do in there is go to the blacksmith and upgrade your equipment and go to the next thing. And it's
A hub with no window dressing.
yeah, except there was like some side quest areas that you could kind of explore, but they never felt like you needed to explore them. There was never any particular draw, and that was the only place in which side quests really were. And the main story was so much more interesting than any of the side quests, because all the side quests that I did, at least, were like, maybe some interesting tidbit of lore, but mostly it's just like, hey, go do this thing and I'll give you a health medallion. I'm like, I don't care. So I'm just going to leave, and I'm going to go to the main quest, and I'm going to find some health medallions along the way. Or whatever the health upgrades were called, I don't remember. Viking blood or something. So yeah, it's like, it had that hub world, but it didn't feel the same because you weren't like in Ocarina of Time's hub world, you're kind of starting in the hub, and then you go out, and then you come back, and then you go out, and then you come back. In God of War, you kind of go out, and then a path loops around, and then it eventually takes you back. And then you go on another path, and it eventually takes you back. So it doesn't feel quite as hubby. It just feels like, oh, I'm back here. Okay.
Huh. I wonder what else contributed to your perception of that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because, all paths are a loop after all when you're going back to the hub. But I wonder what makes you
Right.
feel like those were loops and the others were just straight back. There and back again.
Right.
A God's Tale by Kratos.
Yeah. So anyways, any other...
Lack of differentiating factors.
Yeah, maybe. And just mostly you were just like, okay, I have another boat segment now where I need to go to this side of the lake. Woo.
Yeah,
I didn't
Lake.
dig the boat
Meh.
part. Occasionally in the boat you'd get interesting conversations between Kratos and Atreus, but that was about the extent I thought of what the boat was good. Anyways, is there anything else we have on this topic?
What's
Nothing
the
I
hub
have.
in Breath of the Wild?
Breath of the Wild
Is it everywhere?
Breath of the
Everywhere
Wild-
that's green with trees? Is that the hub?
Yeah,
Breath
there's
of the
no
Wild
hub in
doesn't
Breath of
have
the
a hub.
Wild. Yeah, that's why it's a real open world. I feel like to be a true open world, you don't really have a hub. Hub worlds can be open, and to an extent non-linear, but they're not open worlds, if that makes sense. I'm not sure I'm explaining that well.
But what if it has multi hubs?
At that point, we're getting into
Polygamy.
that point we're getting into a concept where the idea of a hub world doesn't really make sense to apply. If there's like lots of landmarks that you can treat as hubs, it's still mostly an open, but there's not really anything that they lead directly into. It's not really the same thing design wise.
So what we're discovering
you
is
can kind of
that
say that for most open world games. I feel like for Skyrim, you obviously have like your the Mage College and the other Norse guy town and the Throat of the World, and those are like, you could call those like mini hubs, so to speak, where
they're
you're
as
going
much a part
side
of the
questing out of
connective.
there and coming back. But yeah,
They're as much a part of the connective
they're
tissue.
more connected as a world. So I'm not sure I've
Yeah.
ever seen a game exactly like what you're describing there. There's probably one out there.
yeah.
Maybe if I thought a while, I could think of one. I don't know.
If I look at Breath of the Wild, Hate to Know is the hub.
The closest thing I can think of is the two towns in Shovel Knight. Because you got the one town at the beginning, and then you got the one town later in the game.
Mm.
Dem's hubs. There's also Rogue Legacy, where the hub is literally just a row of like merchants before the castle.
Yeah,
How's that for your hub?
or that's part of the hub world.
All right. Anyways, I think we're winding down here about now. So thanks for joining us.
So what we're discovering is
This
these
has been-
concepts are all bullshit.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a linear game. There's no such thing as an open world game. There's no such thing as a
that's
pure
not-
hub game.
No,
If we like get into the
No, that's
esoteric details.
what we're saying at all.
That's not what you're
It's-
saying, it's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but okay. So the Super Mario 64 hub world is qualitatively different than Breath of the Wild's entire open world.
Yeah, because you don't need the hub besides to pass through.
It's because it's
Until
not
the stage.
it's not a hub world. It's just a world. It's not a place you travel through to get to adventure. It's a place where the adventure is happening.
Thank you for joining us
So,
on A Drink to the Past. My
what
name is
constitutes
Sean
a hub?
Michael Thompson, and this is my
What does it mean to
co-host,
be a hub?
Chris, and
Sean
the
is-
guy who joined us,
Sean-
Nick.
Hi, I'm Chris. Sean is signing us out as we're in the middle of an argument. Audad.
That's okay. We can continue that, because we always have the end segment where we just talk about random bullshit until somebody says something like really awkward. So continue.
I've written some stuff you can find on DriveThruRPG. Nick's written some stuff you can find on DriveThruRPG. There, I've technically shelled the thing. And that stuff may or may not be coming to other online stores at a certain time.
If you email me, I'll give you stuff for free.
Email Nick, or go to DriveThruRPG and give him money. Hashtag shameless plug. And you
I
can
still
find
haven't
me
made
on
enough money
2guysplayingzelda.com and on Twitter at SpamOmanoSpam. I do stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is Nick.
Hi.
Also, Nick, you appeared on the podcast, which means you have to drink. You have,
I did drink.
you have a drink?
Then I went to a grocery store.
What kind of alcohol are you imbibing on our podcast tonight?
Oh, it was a Coors Banquet.
Wow, I'm sorry.
I only drank it because I was really stressed out.
Nice.
I'm sorry.
Also, we all forgot to rate our drinks, so this tin cup rye I'm going to give 12. It's decent rye. Not bad. My summer pills, I was going to give it like a 14, but I think I'll give it a 12 because it was a little too warm. So put it in the fridge next time. Chris, what do you give your beer?
Peach Stand Rambler, I'd give it probably a 13. It was pretty tasty. It was all right. It's not my. I don't think I'd like to drink it all the time, but good for a hot summer night.
And Nick, what do you rate that beer on a scale of 3 to 17?
Oh, it's 17. I thought it was 14. I was going to give it an 8. It was a beer. It was a good beer. That's all there is to say about it.
All right. So, 10 is average. Call it 11 because it's good.
It wasn't a mixed drink, so I'm not going to give it anything higher than like 10.
All right. All right. And now the part of the podcast we were talking about earlier where we just talk about random bullshit until somebody says something really awkward. So, yeah.
So we use terms like open world and hub world because they're useful, not because there's some philosophical Platonic ideal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like you said, the open world v linear is a spectrum.
Yes.
And now I'm thinking like hub v question mark is also a spectrum.
So a hub city is a different thing than like a hub world. If we're like the hub in a D&D, the hub city in a D&D game where you go into it, do stuff, and then go out of it is different because it doesn't directly connect you to the outside world. It just serves a different purpose. It's not like the hub world in, I don't know, Crash Bandicoot or Glover or what. Man, I'm referencing all the 90s platformers.
Hub worlds like Mario 64.
Yeah, where
you have like Dark Souls where like all of your bonfires are practically hubs. Some of them have like blacksmiths and that makes them like special hubs, but those aren't exactly hub cities. They're not hub worlds. They're hub fire pits.
They're not even really hubs. They're more like little pit stops.
Yeah, most of them, but some of them are hubs.
It's
especially Firelink Shrine.
So it's when you talk about like the hubs in like a 90s platformer, they're mostly a way to transition they're mostly like a more complicated level select mechanism. Sometimes with its own secrets or own areas to explore, but generally as like the central location for transitioning from point A to point B. And that's not the case with like Bonfire and Dark Souls until late in the game. It's not the case for like a hub.
I mean, Firelink Shrine is pretty much a hub. Like, I feel if you're designing a game, you could like circle something and be like, all right, this is the hub in the context of that game. For instance, I'd say like Halo doesn't have a hub.
You all know, but Halo is also linear.
That's a good example that we completely forgot about.
Yeah, Halo is man's. Don't afraid of anything. I don't know.
Don't you afraid of you?
It's
afraid guy.
It's like a bonfire is a different thing. It's a different kind of thing than those hub worlds I was talking about earlier. It might serve some of the same roles as like a hub city in D&D, and that it's like a place to recharge, level up, do all that, but it doesn't.
A D&D hub city is also a hub world. It's also the place where you level select your next destination.
Except for you can directly transition from one place on. In D&D, you can directly go from one place to another place without ever going back to the city.
Yeah, it's not required.
You can camp in the middle of the woods if you want. You can... It doesn't directly portal you to your destination.
Well, sure, but... I mean, okay, let's look at Kenshi. A game no one's heard about, besides us.
Okay, yeah. So
there's literally a place called Hub. Oh, good.
Okay.
The
Part
Hub. The hub is not a connecting tissue in Kenshi. I think what you're describing is just a multi-world bridge, essentially.
It's
Like I think the hub is like a base of operations or the safe space, unless the place you have to go to access more content. To Google.
there's not going to be
No, there's not. I'm trying.
a solid definition of this because it doesn't refer to a solid concept.
Nope.
But there's a way we can make it refer to. It's kind of like how the word roguelike mutated over the years.
And how
and
bread
that-
is soup.
We're really bad at saying awkward stuff.
And how bread is soup.
Yep.
You're gonna have to elaborate. You got a point there probably, but you're gonna have to elaborate. I haven't heard this one before.
Bread is soup is the main point I took away from watching a Breath of the Wild speedrunning video.
Oh. Oh yeah. I forgot about that.
I forget how it goes. It's like if you can cook it in a pot, then it is a form of soup. And since bread requires water to cook, and you can cook it in a pot technically, it is classified as soup because the definition of pot and soup are extremely vague. So bread technically qualifies as soup.
Oh my god, this is the sandwich alignment chart all over again.
So are we going to get into the whole
Okay.
thing where hot dogs are sandwiches again?
Yeah, okay.
They're not,
So,
but they're connected on the side.
all right. This
Oh,
is
shit.
this is an alignment spectrum.
Oh no, subs.
So, let's go here. Let me
Oh no.
ask where you fall on this. Because I would say that an ice cream taco, an ice cream sandwich is a form of taco, right? It's just like the bottom halves are separated.
Yeah.
Can the bottom halves be separated in a taco?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
In what other case is that considered a taco?
So if I get hard shell tacos, right, and like the bottom gets soaked with something, and then like it comes apart, it's still a taco, right? And it's just the bottom separated. I just got hard shell stuff on the side.
Right. But that's a broken taco.
Yeah. So a sandwich is just a broken taco. I think is my point.
But
But the sub on the left, it's connected
but a
on
soft
one
taco
side.
will never break on you.
Yeah, it's a soft taco.
A soft taco will never
Wait
break on
a
you.
minute.
You can't
I
have
know
a
what the
broken
difference is
soft
between
taco.
tacos and sandwiches. It's how the ingredients are inserted. A taco is meant with the ingredients to be facing upwards, whereas a sandwich has the ingredients facing sideways. It's all about the direction the ingredients face.
So a hot dog is a taco then.
Yes, a hot dog would be closer to a taco than a sandwich.
It is.
And that makes perfect sense in my brain.
Yeah, you know what? I'm convinced.
All right. So
What about a Pop-Tart?
A Pop-Tart,
Pop-Tart is
is
a
a
pie.
pastry.
Yeah, but if you look at the alignment chart here,
Well, the alignment chart says it's not following the ingredient or the structures. Like, in what way is a Pop-Tart a sandwich?
so it's got ingredients in the center, right? And it's surrounded by like a bready material.
With ingredients on the exterior.
Yeah. Some sandwiches got that. I mean, there's like bread that has like cheese melted on top of it. Why not
But
bread
it's
with
still
frosting on
part
it?
of the bread structure.
Okay, a jelly donut is a sandwich.
No, it's a
jelly
pastry.
Donut is a pie.
You're both right.
All pastries are pies.
Wait, so pizzas are pastry? I mean, yeah, pizzas are pastries, technically.
And pies.
They're just open-faced. Actually,
wait,
a pizza
isn't
is
it-
just an open-faced taco.
Yes, this is correct. Because the
There
ingredients
is
are
some
inserted
truth
on the
to that.
top.
Because you could take a pizza and you could fold it up, and then it would have the bread in the perfect shape. It would be a taco.
That is actually accurate. Yep. but it's not a sandwich.
No.
And a Pop-Tart is not a goddamn sandwich.
No, a Pop-Tart is a pie. Which, if you can fold
Like-
a pie in half and turn it into a taco, that means you could fold a Pop-Tart in half and turn it into a taco.
A pastry
But
is a dough of flour, water, and shortening that may be savory or sweetened.
I got some pizza on the
So,
counter, and
So
I
is pizza
would
shortened?
like to eat it.
Don't know. Assume so.
Yeah, so pizza might technically be a pastry. So is a Pop-Tart a type of calzone?
Yeah, I think a Pop-Tart would be closer to a calzone than a sandwich.
But is a calzone a type of taco? Because it's just a taco with the top
No,
half
because it's
formed
enclosed.
together.
Tacos are by definition not enclosed.
Are they indeed?
Tacos
This
are
is
either
taco-
Is
open
that
faced
according
or
to
folded.
Merriam-Webster or Dictionary.com?
Synthesize it.
So what if I take my calzone and cut a slit along the spine? Is it then a taco?
It's a calzone that just has a slit in it. Just like a broken taco is still a taco.
So if
You know,
I take
I've
a
looked
taco
up the official
and I
definition of
pinch
taco.
the top closed, is it still a taco or is now it a calzone?
Well, if you crimp the top closed, it's a fucking ravioli.
Okay. You know those PB and J like things that were like sealed completely? They're like
Uncrustables?
so that's the Uncrustables. Are those sandwiches or are those
No.
raviolis?
Well, then, I mean, okay, ravioli is me being facetious, but they're definitely not sandwiches anymore.
Ravi-sandwich?
Okay. Are they calzones?
What
Of
is?
course, because a calzone is
gyoza?
encased in bread, right?
Yeah. Are they jelly donuts?
They're whatever a
No, 'cause
jelly
they're-
donut
they're-
is.
Donuts are made out of fried stuff.
Yeah. Okay. You know what?
Not bread.
That's fair.
Calzones
All right.
have bread. Jelly donuts have
So-
fried stuff.
Where do I go to get a taco donut?
My house. Bring the donuts. I'll make it happen.
Okay.
I kind of want to take you up on this.
Oh, this is now reminding me of the time I tried to make churros, but they were just like little chodes frying up in the. They didn't taste like churros at all because it was just sugar, not cinnamon
I'm
sugar.
struggling to
This
see you
lightsaber
making
that I am
food.
waving around on the video like a nincompoop was advertised as a desk lamp, and it does not do its job as a desk lamp very well, but it's a neat little lightsaber.
Maybe the point of this conversation is that definitions are there to be useful, not to be accurate.
And that's pretty much what I said at the start of this tangent.
Thank you for
Is the
coming to
vagina
Attempt
a
to the
taco?
Past, the only gaming
Yes.
podcast where we end our podcast by talking semantics over terminology instead of video games.